Fastamai, good evening. I'm Lewis Foster and welcome to part 2 of this 2-part Island Life special looking at Isle of Man-based addiction charity Motiv8. Last week we spoke with peer mentors for the charity, Joe, Jason and Chris. Tonight, for the next half an hour, we'll be speaking with other members of the group about their experiences with multiple forms of addiction, how it feels to come to Motiv8 for help, and tackling a stigma right here on the island. Please be aware that tonight's programme contains discussions which some may find distressing, including substance abuse and suicide. Motiv8 has served the Isle of Man since 1978 and is now taking approaches to become more visible in the community. So let's start by speaking again with CEO Thea Ozanturk and Motiv8 fundraiser Nicola Brown.
We don't have a waiting list. Mostly people reach out to us via the telephone. More commonly now as well through social media. There's several ways they can get in touch with us. They can email, text even, and we have a promise to respond within 48 hours. Generally we respond the same day, unless it's the weekend. Initially people generally come to us on a one-to-one, and that's fine and that can continue. And some people say, oh no, I really don't want to do groups. And for some people who perhaps, as I say, we touch every social strata. People come to us who have high profiles and so they want to remain anonymous, and that's absolutely fine. But for some people, they really benefit from the groups, the recovery movement that exists. I think it was close to 1,500 attendances at the recovery groups last year or the year before. It's roughly around that every year. So it's this kind of underground movement that's going on, but we want to open it up now so that even more people can be aware and know the support.
Is that the key word, awareness? Because you're not the only charity I've spoken to as well that said actually in recent years a lot has, awareness has almost become a household term in the last 5 years as far as I'm aware, with many different organisations and causes. Are you seeing your numbers increase in recent years? And oftentimes when we look at the numbers of people coming forward, we say, oh, it's almost getting out of control, for instance. But is it not the case? Is it just more people, as we literally say, becoming aware of the services and knowing that the help is out there?
I think it is about awareness. They're aware that we are available for them, but also they are aware that perhaps something that they didn't consider was an issue for them actually might be something that they'd like to talk about and address.
And what have the numbers been like for you guys over the last few years?
Between 1920 and 2021, we saw a raise in 39% in appointments being attended across the board. So that's quite a significant number, directly impacted by COVID and the pandemic, of course. And we're seeing a lot of people now approaching us for help. We are starting to raise that awareness and make it more acceptable to have that chat, that first conversation. I have been amazed from that first phone call or that first point of contact. We get people through the doors with no waiting list. There's no prescriptive length of time of care. So they can come to us for a short amount of time, or we've got people within our service that have been seeing us for 16 plus years. So it's there as a support mechanism throughout their journey, no matter where they are on there.
And just on a personal level, how long have you both been involved with Motiv8 and how have you seen it change over the years?
I first started working for Motiv8 as an apprentice counsellor in 1992. So I've worked for the charity since then, apart from 2 years when I was a founding member of the drug and alcohol team. I joined for 2 years, but came back as the manager at Motiv8 in 2000. So yeah, they'll be carrying me out in a box.
It's a lifelong commitment.
I love it. No 2 days are the same. I'm very committed to the clients and the client groups. And this now is a really important time, I think, because we're now at a stage where we can really open up and to start talking about this in a more open way and not to see it so stigmatised and people being felt that they've been pushed into corners and it's a new time for addiction to be out there and to be able to talk about it in the community.
Certainly, Nicola.
So I'm in my second month with Motiv8. And it has been great because it's a new role. I've been able to sculpt what we need to do and how we need to do it, which I think is starting to work, and we're starting to see that work pay off with what we're doing.
And I'll try not to make you feel like you're in a job interview now, but what did you feel like? What did you expect before you started with Motiv8 then?
Well, I had some idea of the work that they do with people and with families, but I didn't expect what I saw when I came through those doors. The work sometimes that our counsellors do with people that they see, it isn't just an hour session a week. This can be them going to see some of the other services that people need to get access to, down to the food bank. We work with a lot of services together to bring people forward. It's not just an hour session. This is support for their lives.
And we'll move on now, because we spoke when we were speaking with the group last time. A couple of the members there mentioned how they'd had run-ins with the law over the years as well. Something you mentioned yourself, Thea. It's an experience that does happen. And so what facilities and mechanisms are in place to support those that do have who do find themselves arrested as a consequence, I suppose, of their addiction?
Well, we have two schemes, actually three schemes if we include the work that we do with the prison as well. But we have got these schemes with the police that are not funded by anybody. They come from the charitable fund at Motiv8. And I'll talk about the drug arrest referral scheme. That's run by a worker by experience. So that's a person who's in recovery, who's employed at Motiv8. So we have a few people that work at Motiv8 who are in recovery and have now gone on to become full-time members of staff. So if you've been someone that's been picked up by the police because you've been in possession of a drug, generally they tend to be younger people. They're just out at the start of life. It is normal, a part of adolescence growing up to experiment. So, there aren't many people who haven't experimented with a drug, if even alcohol, tobacco, and maybe cannabis, cocaine. This is part of youth of today growing up. And so if you've been arrested, you have an opportunity to come and speak to this worker by experience. So you talk to somebody who's been there, knows the pitfalls, and that opportunity then affords you to avoid going down the criminal justice route. And you get an opportunity as well to enter treatment if it is an issue for you. So if you need to come and speak to somebody on a one-to-one and do some work on your substance use. But generally, they don't need to do that. Generally, it is that education session. And then that, if you've complied with that, that means you haven't gone to court. And that means that your life hasn't been irrevocably damaged to the point where, it stops you from getting a job in the future that you may, be pursuing, going to America, travelling abroad, all those things that having a criminal record for a drug-related offence can, bring about for you.
And so it's all about sort of heading it off at the pass,
Absolutely.
I suppose. And you have a worker who does that for you at Motiv8 as well. Is that quite a stretched part of the service? Is there a need for more, or?
It can be very busy. I mean, last year there was 117 of those sessions. The year before we had more because obviously the COVID and the lockdown periods, it obviously reduced the amount of times that people would have been out and being seen by the police in possession of a substance. But generally it's about 150 of those sessions a year. And can I just say that the recidivism or the rate of reoffending is virtually non-existent. So we never see those people again. So it works. And again, as I said, it is something about growing up that you experiment, you try new things, and for some people it can go wrong, particularly in a small community. So this is of enormous value, and this is something that the charity runs out of its own funds.
Back at that Smart Recovery meeting earlier this year, I spoke with Stephen, John and Stephen about their first encounter with Motiv8 and what they perceive as the stigma around addiction. I'll start with you, John. Tell me about thinking back to when you first got in contact with Motiv8 and why you reached out.
Well, I reached out because I'd finished up at DAT and I was actually sober, but they were a bit worried about me for 6 months after I'd sobered up. Where was I going to go? So they advised me, smart and Motiv8. So I kept backing off, same thing again. Who are you going to see? What? Embarrassment, nervous, and eventually got the courage to actually come down. And I don't think I've missed a week since I've been here, and that was 5 years ago. Yeah, so it's done me quite a lot of help, loads of help. I've been sober since I've come here. The staff are great, you're welcome when you come in. I see different people coming in, they may be relapsed or relapsed, whatever else it is. They get all the comfort in the world and they go back on the track and they get the support again, what they get. It's also helped my family quite a lot as well, that they're more grateful for it. If I miss maybe a Monday, come on a Wednesday, they wonder what's going on. So, so they fully support it as well. All I can say is really that without Smart, I don't think I'd be sat here now. I think I'd be somewhere in a gully somewhere, so it's done me quite a lot of good, yeah.
How much of a safety net, I suppose, is Motiv8? You mentioned if you miss a session, they'll reach out, they'll come out and say, where are you, John? Are you coming along next time? Is it? Yeah, that's right. It's like almost like a family connection, isn't it?
It is, yeah, it is like a family, yeah, it is, yeah. And as you say, once I leave that door, like that's it, it's we're different. It's a different world in here than what it is outside, sort of thing. Well, that's my personal thing, it is, it's as I say, it's helped me, immensely, and I'm very grateful.
Are you from the Isle of Man, born on the Isle of Man?
I'm born in the Isle of Man, yeah. Yeah, I am born here, yeah. And I was drinking probably 20 years, well, not supposed to say it, but an alcoholic for about 20 years. And I just decided enough was enough. And it took me quite a while, it took me about 18 months to sober up. Once I sobered up, with the help of it, obviously with these, with all the courses they do as well, I've been sober for 5 years, and it's, I'm really grateful for it. And my family are as well.
And I'll move to you, Stephen, and I know you're vegan so far. First thing I know about you, but tell us a bit about your journey to where you are sitting on the sofa today then.
Well, my journey started back in 2012 when a major event in my life ended up in prison for 3 years. I'm a gambler. My gambling addiction was really serious. It lasted 11 years in its height, losing lots of money. It led me to taking money from my employer at the time, a lot, and I ended up serving 3 years in prison. I had help at the time from, it was GamCare at the time, who now associated in, we call Motiv8, we brought in Motiv8 to help me. I had help as soon as I went to prison. I had help for months, went into classes, had individual help, talking about therapy. My problem was when I came out, I thought I could help myself, which you can't. I realised you can't. And 8 years later, after being no gambling, I crashed in 2020 when lockdown first happened. Mm-hmm. That was the biggest effect for me, having nothing to do, being sat at home because we were in lockdown for 3 months.
And you say crash?
Yeah, I think the boredom of having nothing to do. Because I realised my addiction it's related to my addictive personality. You're always on the go, your mind's always whirling around, and it's you need something to do. And without having anything to do, and other events in my life, I had 3 separate events that brought my life into meltdown, and I went looking for a way out, which was my gambling. 6 to 8 months later, everything crashed again. I sought help with Motiv8, and ever since then I've been coming back to the meetings, and the help I've had has been amazing. It's changed my life, it's changed my personality, my family's life, because they're the ones who suffer as well, friends. It's just made me a much better person.
So do you feel like you owe a lot to Motiv8 almost?
Yeah, I owe everything to Motiv8, because you need Motiv8. You realise if you don't accept that you're not an addict and you want to get help, nothing's going to change. You're just going to keep going the way it is. You'll keep relapsing, going back in, relapsing, going back in. But they help you realise triggers, just what you need to change in your life. I've had help with, and I owe them everything, because I'm far much of a better person now. My family life is so much better. Everything in my life has changed. I feel amazing now. I felt low. I felt suicidal. I've come close on occasions, but I've never had that thought ever since coming back. So now I owe them everything, definitely.
And you said when you came out of prison after those 3 years, you felt you could get better on your own. I imagine that's quite a common feeling when you first start on that path to recovery. You think, I'll tackle this by myself. It's something I think we can all learn, isn't it? That there's never any shame in coming forward for help. In daily life, we need to reach out for other people. But what barriers do you have to overcome in order to say, I can't do this on my own?
It's the realisation that if you're in the height of addiction, you become someone who you don't see it, you don't realise you are that person. You become a horrible person. You lie, you'll do anything to hide everything. And it ruins everyone's life. It destroys everything. It destroys your life. You get ill, and you just got to change. And I'd say the biggest thing I've realised is when you realise you're an addict of anything, it's accepting it. If you don't accept it, then you can't change, and you've got to want to change. If you don't want to change, then it won't work. And I want to change for myself, but also for my family. And you've got to look after yourself. If you don't look after yourself in life, I've had to change everything about the way my life has become. Regards around money, regards around relationships, everything. And work. If you're not happy in life, everything's going to come crashing down again. And that's the biggest thing.
Thank you, Stephen. And I'll move on to you now, Stephen. So take us back to the first time you got in contact with Motiv8 as well.
So it was about 3 years ago. I'd hit complete rock bottom. I think I'd always had an unhealthy relationship with alcohol, but I felt that I was in control of that relationship, and I wasn't. And it got to the stage where I was in hospital, and I had to self-refer to DAT, which is the Drug and Alcohol Team. There was about a 2 to 3 week waiting list to see DAT, and being at rock bottom, I felt I needed help immediately. So I came to Motiv8, and the beauty of that was, as soon as I walked in the door, I seen a counsellor, just to sort of say where I was at and to say what services they offered. I went to a meeting that night. I never thought that I would go to a meeting. I never thought that I would share publicly my innermost thoughts and feelings. Went to a meeting that night. There was somebody there that I knew, which actually made it a lot easier for me, because I thought, I'm not in this on my own. And then, so I've been coming, I go to one meeting every week. Some weeks I go to 5 meetings, and again with Motiv8, it's not just around the addiction side of things. They do stuff on dealing with depression, dealing with anxiety, sleep management, which all kind of tie in. When you get into that addiction, depression is there, anxiety is there. It's difficult to say what comes first. Does the depression lead to the drinking, or does the drinking lead to the depression? But it all ties in, and it's just continuous learning. So I was alcohol-free for 2.5 years, and then a couple of months ago, I had a lot of stuff going on, so I did have a drink. It was one night, and I was able to come back in to Motiv8. There was no judgment. There was nobody, looking at me as if to say, "Oh, you failed." It was just all-out support. That's to me what the place is. It's just support from the staff, from our fellow attendees. Even in 2 o'clock in the morning, if you're feeling rough or you're feeling anxious, there's always somebody available for you to speak to.
And you mentioned how when you're at rock bottom, you can feel depression, anxiety, those kind of things. How much of an uplift in your mental health did it? How did it aid your mental health, I suppose, when you started sharing those feelings with other people, perhaps these people around you?
100%. I mean, I'm Scottish, obviously. I'm from a generation where we don't really talk about your feelings. Everything's bottled up. I wouldn't speak to my family the way I speak to people in this room. I wouldn't speak to close friends the way I speak to people in this room. But I can be honest and be open. And it's not just about being open and honest with people in the room. By saying it out loud, you're being open and honest with yourself. And that gives you the realisation that, you can change. The beauty here as well is, say, some of the people have been here 16 years. 16 years sober. That's massive, and that's great to see that. And it's also great to see somebody who comes in who's a week sober, because you've got both sides of the spectrum there. You've got something to aim for, you've got that experience, and then you've also got the reminder of what life was like, and you can then encourage them at the start of their journey that you're 2 years in. At the beginning, 2 years seems unachievable, but it comes around pretty quick.
And you were saying 16 years, so to meet guys like Chris, how much of an inspiration is that?
Chris is a great guy. He's got a quote for everything. He's got a quote for every occasion. But yeah, I mean, Chris has experienced a lot. Not just Chris. Joe's 7 years. I couldn't even tell. There's probably, but just in this room alone here, there's probably a good 30 years of sobriety. So that's great.
I understand it was your idea as well. You mentioned about the stigma that can often surround these issues. So tell me a bit about how that stigma has affected you and what that stigma is as far as you see it.
For me, from the earliest I started coming, I was honest with everybody. I'm very open. Stigma-wise, I personally think that the stigma is getting better. I think it's every person with an addiction it affects. I think it's 6 other people. So there's very, very few people in the Isle of Man who haven't been touched by some form of addiction. So I think that most people now have been exposed to some form of addiction, whether it's themselves, a family member, or a close friend. There's a lot more people talking about it. There's a lot more on social media. There's a lot more things on television, like Paul Merson one that he's done about gambling. So there's more people talking about it now, which I think is great to get it out in the open.
But is there still a lingering attitude that looks down upon people in recovery and people suffering with addiction as well?
I mean, I think it's a difficult one because even before I came to Motiv8, my idea of an alcoholic was an old man sitting on a park bench drinking wine out of a brown paper bag. And I think some people still think that's the reality, but that's not the reality. The reality are that there's people who go to work every day that are struggling with addiction. There's, very, very successful people are struggling with addiction.
You mentioned social media as well, and while you say that can be, like you say, a force for good, and it gets people talking as well, there's also undoubtedly, everyone's experienced it, a negative side to social media. Do you think there's a dark corner where things can turn sour online?
I mean, I think social media in itself is an addiction for a lot of people. But in terms of my experience of social media, I've not seen anything negative on social media in relation to addiction. It's all positive as far as I've seen, but that doesn't mean to say that it is.
I'll come back to you, Stephen, as well, and we'll talk about that word again, stigma. And is it all about being able to admit when you do have a problem and when you want to come forward for recovery? Is it a personal stigma as well?
Yeah, I'd say it is. Me myself, when I first come in and I first come down to my first meeting, my perception of what I was coming into, even though I was a normal guy, was I'm coming into the lowest of lows. That's what I honestly think. And it's horrible to think that I thought that at the time, but from what I met when I come in, they were the loveliest of people, most warm, welcome people, and the biggest smiles on their face when you first come in, and they help you to open up so much. They're from all walks of life, and it's being in with people who you have an association with, which is an addiction, helps you so much because you can talk, they understand. You don't get that from any of your friends because they don't understand. Unless they have an addiction, they open up about it and they are honest with themselves. No one understands. Even my family find it hard.
So when we say the word stigma, are we talking about a lack of understanding from others and the fear that somebody, like you say, isn't going to understand? And by coming into these groups, are we breaking down those walls completely?
Yeah, by coming into the groups, we are breaking it down, and I'd say you get, like Steve said, we are having so much more positive on media, like the Paul Merson thing. I found that was amazing, and I'm hoping, because I've reached out to him to see with my story. I'm waiting on him coming back to see what help I can do. I just want to help people who have had a similar addiction, of anything, to help them realise themselves. Don't be afraid to share. Don't be afraid to be honest with yourself. You've got to be honest with yourself to realise you want to change. I think social media can help with that.
When I went to get help, I knew I had a drink problem, but I didn't think I was an addict. And it was only when I went to meetings and whatever, I found out that I did have it. I wasn't an addict. I think you try and deny it, and then everyone around you tries to deny it. Well, they know, but you don't know. And once I come to them terms that I knew I was an addict and I knew I couldn't drink again. Well, I could, but I knew I had to stop. that helped me quite a lot, you know. And I only found out from coming to like meetings like this and seeing different people the way they was as well, and that's what it was. But as you say about the stigma, it is hard out there, you know. When I first stopped, you know, I didn't want my name mentioned. I did a few charity things, and I did a bit of poetry, this, that, and the other, and it was always a blank underneath. Now I don't care, you know, but it was it. And even a relation of mine, I said I was going to go public on something, and he asked me not to. He says, you know, and I said that's true, 'cause I said no, I won't go public. My wife said, go public. So I did go public, and then 2 days later, he come in and shook my hand. He said it was brilliant. And he was like that as well, the stigma. But he actually come and shook my hand, and he said it was brilliant what I did, you know. So, yeah, I think it is getting better, but it's just going to be great. It's got to be more publicised, and, you know, I think that's what it, you know, as yourself being here as well, like.
I was very grateful for John and both Stephen's honesty around their experiences, and for that too of Charlotte.
I first got in touch with Motiv8 as a one-to-one with a counsellor. I'm a very slow learner, so I came for many years, gradually learning a bit more to accept the situation. I knew from the moment that I'd started drinking that was my problem, but I didn't really want to stop. I just wanted to stop the chaos that had come through it, which saw me, as a result of things I'd done while I was drunk, I'd end up in prison here on the island, and also being hospitalised very many times. And then I also realised that it wasn't just about drink, as you've heard people share here. There's other addictions, and I realised I had a problem with prescription drugs as well. So I've been able to look at all of those issues, and I think what really helps with Motiv8 now for me is that they support SMART meetings. I trained to be a facilitator for SMART, which doesn't mean I'm a counsellor, just helps stop any bun fights in a meeting, which never happened, so we're fortunate. And I get a lot out of that myself, because I think, as it's been shared, I think I had to come to a point in my mindset where I was ready to acknowledge that if I didn't drink, actually there was hope, and I could stop and I could rewire my brain to be able to learn to enjoy life or live life or deal with life in a more constructive way. And that's what going to the SMART meetings has helped me with. So I don't have a counsellor anymore, but I know I can ring anybody and Motiv8 anytime I'm struggling. Yeah, I'd like to say that I also would have been 5 years sober, but again, I made a mistake last year for about a month back in the summer, and I ended up in hospital again. But I was able to always come back to meetings and never judged. In fact, people gave me a hug and welcomed me back. So the support is massive.
The meetings at Motiv8 wouldn't be possible without its workers, who often have a wealth of experience and knowledge of addiction themselves. Two of those are Louise and Mark.
I've been working here. Well, I first started with the Smart Recovery Groups. Thea helped me set those up in 2013. And then I started part-time with Motiv8, or volunteering first, then part-time, and now I'm a full-time worker here, yeah.
And what do you see on a day-to-day basis in terms of the growth amongst those SMART meetings? How does it feel before every single meeting and before every single meeting, I suppose? Is it a heartwarming job to have?
Oh, definitely, yeah, definitely. I mean, all these guys in here, I've seen them come to their first meeting, I've seen them grow, I've seen them, you know, develop into the people they are today, and it's just great to see. Yeah, really great.
Okay, and yourself, how did you get involved in Motiv8 and to end up where you are now working?
Similar story to Louise, really. Came through as a volunteer, and then he ended up getting sort of part paid for it, in line with my benefits as it was at the time, and then Thea took a chance on me and gave me a full-time paid role here, so yeah, it's just gone from leaps and bounds, really.
So why did you come on as a volunteer in the first place?
My journey's a bit like Jason's. I had to go away and do a bit of recovery, a bit of work on myself, and at the end of it all, you know, I was like, oh, how can I ever thank you? And they were like, you go out and give what we've given you to other people, and Motiv8 advertised for a support worker here, so I thought, well, I'll go for that role, and went in, did the interview. I mean, I wouldn't have been able to have done the interview without the work I'd done on myself in the UK. I became a peer mentor myself in the UK and whatnot, and I kind of knocked it out of the ballpark. Needless to say, I didn't get the job, but Thea recognised that there was something there and gave me the voluntary role. And like I say, I'm a paid up member now of Motiv8 team, and yeah, it's great.
And how rewarding has that process been for you? Like, same with Louise, seeing people in day out, and knowing the journeys that they're on, and seeing the likes of Chris and Joe and Jason becoming peer mentors as well. Do you recognise that journey?
Totally recognise that journey. Yeah, it's just amazing to see. I've been there myself. Like I said, I was peer mentor myself, and we've rolled that out here at Motiv8, and we're seeing other members come through, and hopefully in time to come, they're going to be able to help people.
And we're seeing more the occasional funding. We had the Lottery Trust funding as well the other week, and that's going towards peer mentoring, training up more people to be a part of that. Is that what's in your mind a lot about getting people onto that next step where you guys are as well?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've got this great space down here, like the group work programme here, so it's about giving people that opportunity, creating a recovery community, I think people have mentioned before. So it's just getting people in recovery or who want to be in recovery together and getting that connection, and it's just going to build and build, I think. Well, I hope it is, yeah.
And what would you like to see for Motiv8 itself? More volunteers, perhaps, more people coming forward?
Yeah, just more people with experience. Like, I think, was it Joe said it, or Chris? It was some, just speaking to somebody who's been there and knows what you're going through. I think people find that really, really helpful. I see clients on a one-to-one basis as well, and I think they appreciate that I can understand where they're coming from. I can understand how they feel, and I've been there and I've done that, and I've come through the other end. So it gives them a bit of hope as well, I would like to think, yeah.
And tell us how you set up a SMART meeting.
How it first started in the island?
Yeah.
Well, like Mark, I went away off island. I was in rehab, and I was introduced to Smart Recovery whilst I was there. When I came back to the island, there wasn't really any support groups like Smart, so didn't really know where to start. So I came to Thea and said, look, this is what I want to do. Is there any way that you would be able to help me? And Thea said she was actually thinking, and she'd actually looked into Smart and was thinking of doing starting something up. So it just sort of grew from there. I did the facilitator training, and we just sort of started with one group a week, and now we run 3 groups a week. So yeah, and it's just grown and grown. We started with one person at the first meeting, and then it was Thea and I sat on our own for a few weeks on our own. But then word got out, and people started coming, and yeah, and it's just grown to what it is today. And it's all down to these guys really as well. Yeah.
And is that what it's all about? Just having those meetings there, regardless of who's going to turn up, whether it's one person or, like you say, so when it was just yourself and Thea sat there, was there any thought that you thought, oh, maybe we should pack it in, or was it no, almost build it and they'll come, that kind of mentality?
Yeah, no, it's definitely that, build it, they would come. We knew that it would happen. Once people knew it was there, I think it was getting that sort of out there, and yeah, people started coming in, and they've never looked back, I hope. And people have been coming for years, and they still come. Like Jo said, she comes once a week, and that's her thing. Once a week, she still comes after all these years. So yeah, I hope it gives that people, and then they give back as well. To other people that are coming through. Yeah. Did
you ever expect it to grow to 3 a week?
No. No, I thought one a week would be thing in the evening, but now we've sort of started it in the lunchtime. So it's various times, so people can. It will fit into people's daily lives, Yeah.
And is it the same group every time, or do you keep it to just the time and anyone's free to come? Anyone's
free to come. There is a sort of format, so it's not going into life stories or anything like that. It concentrates on the here and now, gives tools that are CBT based to help people in their recovery as well. So it's just a general sort of check-in, and then and tools as well to help people along the way, whether it's coping with urges, building motivation, living a balanced life, or whatever they might be struggling with that week. There is a tool for them.
And by focusing on the here and now, as you mentioned it, does that help? And not, like you mentioned, not saying life stories all the time, but by focusing on the here and now, does that help when people do have a relapse perhaps, and have to come in and say, as it was put by Charlotte, falling off the wagon again? Does it help by saying, not saying how's your journey been all along, but how are you doing today? How are you doing this week? Is it's because it's a day-by-day thing?
Yeah, definitely. If people do come back after a lapse or a relapse, it's not about beating themselves up. It's saying, what can I learn from that? What happened? What was leading up to it? How was I feeling? What was the situation thing? And sort of getting them to learn from it, to move forward, rather than going backwards, yeah.
It's almost time to end, but I want to leave the final words of the man we heard from last week, who many have described as an inspiration, with 16 years clean, Chris.
I think you can say that marijuana is a gateway drug, or any of the what might be termed as lesser drugs, whereas as a rule it's normally trauma is the gateway. Hurt people, hurt other people. People assume that addiction is in the blood, whereas it's not. I've only just forgiven my father now for how he treated me as a child, but he treated me basically with the tools that he had or was given when he was a child. So hurt people hurt other people, and the thing is, the gift of trauma is empathy, and so that's why we all love helping each other, because we know, right, and we love to put that stuff back in, because we want to motivate, and us want to do it.
If you'd like to speak to someone about the issues raised in tonight's episode, you can reach Motiv8 by calling during working hours between Monday and Friday on free phone 0808 1624 627, or you can email contact@motiv8.im. That's MOTIV and the number 8. I've been Lewis Foster, and thank you for listening.